Catherine, are we ready to go? Yeah. You just hit
Yeah.
go.
So I say good evening, everyone, and welcome to this meeting of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee. My name is Marie-Therese Rossi. I'm the chair of Overview and Scrutiny. This is the first committee meeting of this committee held in the town hall, and as you can see, we are in the chamber and not committee room 1 because our permission to have external or virtual meetings expired on the 6th of May. So everyone who is participating has to be here in person. The event is also being streamed on LiveTube, and members of the public and the media are welcome to watch the meeting remotely and listen to discussions taking place. To keep everyone safe, can I remind all those present to keep a face mask on at all times other than when called to speak. So I have the committee chairs at the top, and other members of the committee I have placed or have been placed a bit lower down. And I think other councillors I think there are no other councillors apart from lead members who are here. So I am told to remind you about social distancing and to keep vigilant about that, and to follow guidance about moving from one part of the chamber to another, and also not to chat at the end of the meeting in groups. So now I will welcome everyone who is watching on YouTube, and I think it would be appropriate for us to start with 72 seconds of silence to remember those who lost their lives in the Grenfell tragedy. Thank you. Thank you. Before we start the meeting, I would ask members of the committee and other councillors and officers to only switch their microphone on when they are called to speak, when they wish to speak, and also please remain seated when you are speaking, we normally stand up, but this time I'm asking everyone to stay seated. And if a councillor would like to speak and have not been called, please raise your hand to get my attention. There are a few members of the public who are present. They will be invited at the appropriate time to come and speak to the microphone on the top bench there. In the interests of fairness and also the lateness of how the meeting, I would like people to speak for only 5 minutes. There are no apologies for absence. Do any... Oh, sorry. My Vice Chair, Councillor Adrian Bell-Cox, cannot be with us tonight, so he sends his apologies. Do any members have any interest to declare? So the first item is the minutes of the 10th of March meeting of this committee. Do the committee agree that I sign them as a correct record of what happened in the meeting? Okay. So the first item on the agenda is the Grenfell recovery report, and I would like to invite the Leader of the Council, Councillor Elizabeth Campbell, to speak, and then I will ask the other lead members to speak, and also Callum and Joe. Okay, Elizabeth.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You'll remember in December 2020, the leadership team agreed a new resourcing framework which set out our plans for the next 3 years of the Grenfell Recovery Programme. And you'll remember that this committee considered a draft of the framework at its meeting in November, and then the final version was also shaped by the feedback that we heard from this committee and residents and key community partners. So the framework set out our high-level plans in each of the areas of the programme, but we also made overarching commitments in 3 key areas. The first, we committed to ensuring greater resident involvement. Secondly, we said we'd have a much greater focus on the impact and the outcomes, just to ensure that we are absolutely clear about what we're trying to achieve across the whole recovery programme. And thirdly, we committed to building a sustainable legacy from Grenfell that runs throughout all of our work as a council. Now, look, I was clear at the time that the resourcing framework was an important statement of intent, but it would require a great deal of work to deliver. And I'm pleased to say that since then, officers have been focusing on putting the framework into practice, as well as continuing to deliver a wide range of existing initiatives. So almost 6 months on from the publication of the framework, this report provides an update on the first of our key commitments. That is how we've involved our communities in the design of the next phase of the programme, and how we've done it to be as inclusive as possible. Now, I won't summarise the report here because you've all read it, but you'll see it sets out in full the wide range of consultation and engagement with residents that has taken place since December. Since then, we have engaged with the bereaved and survivors on the next phase of the dedicated service. We've spoken to residents about emotional health and well-being for adults and for children, the plans for Year 2 of the Grenfell Projects Fund, the Community Leadership Programme, a new Housing Legacy Fund, and a number of smaller initiatives. We have heard from hundreds of residents throughout this activity, with over 600 views being expressed through surveys, through focus groups, workshops, and other channels. We've also communicated widely about our plans in newsletters, on social media, via local networks, to try and raise as much awareness as possible. And I'd just like to take this opportunity to thank everyone who's participated in this to date, and hope that we've generated some interest and some actually excitement for the next phase of the programme. The leadership team will be considering reports in some of these key areas later this week on Thursday, and in other areas, decisions will come later in the year. All of these proposals are directly shaped by what we've heard, which I hope is proof of our commitment to listen. However, I'd just like to say that these decisions won't be the end of our engagement with communities. As we launch new initiatives, we'll continue to seek feedback and involvement. In some areas, we're going to be embarking on new engagement activity, as, for example, the wide-ranging consultation and review that we're planning with bereaved and survivors on the next phase of support for the dedicated service. As we move forward, our focus will be about embedding these new arrangements and about delivering our other key commitments around impact, outcomes, and legacies. And those will be the focus of the next report that we bring to this committee in the autumn, which will be our first cross-programme impact report. And finally, I'd just like to say thank you for this opportunity to come to update the committee, and I would welcome their input onto any areas that are covered on this report.
Thank you very much, Leader.
Oh, can I ask you one thing, Madam Chair? Could you put your microphone slightly down, because otherwise I can't hear you. Thank you.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Better.
Okay. Now, would any other, Anne Siren or Josh Grenfell, would you like to speak about the report at this point? Do you have anything to add? And then I'll go on to Callum and Joe.
Chairman, I think the leader has summed it up very well, but I'd just like to say that as part of the, the next steps of emotional health and wellbeing support for children, we've done, I think, our utmost job to speak to as many people in the community as possible, to as many residents as possible, to children especially, to schools, to really hear that voice of the child and what they would like as a service going forward from later on in this year. And I think hopefully that is agreeable to residents and to people who use the service. But I'm willing to obviously take questions on that from all members of this committee this evening.
Anne, would you like to say anything?
Well, just a few words from me, and I think the leader summed up the paper and summarised it really well. I think importantly for me, and well, I guess the reason why I'm here in this position is about making sure that local people are heard. For me, it's about the voice of the bereaved, the survivors, and, our residents, the wider affected community. And I think the consultations that we've done, it's not perfect, but we have spoken with hundreds of people. We've done it in new ways that we've never done before. And I think we have got a really rich feedback on all of these programs. And as I say, I think it's all about what local residents have got to say, and that's what I'm keen that we listen to. So I'm really looking forward to the feedback from you, from your committee, and any questions.
Callum and Joe? Okay, we'll go then to the residents who would like to speak. So I'll call firstly Kimia. You know where to go, yeah.
Thank you.
So, Kimia, if you could speak for 5 minutes, I am going to limit it to 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much for allowing us to be here, and glad to be back in the council chambers for meetings, face-to-face meetings. I think it's shocking that we have to do all this heavy work and heavy lifting. We're not councillors, we're not officers, we're volunteers, people in the community who have been saying consistently that something is wrong, something is going very badly wrong. And the council just continues with the language of we're doing co-design, we're doing consultations, we're doing engagement. But I can speak on behalf of the next of kin, and I also note that the minutes that have been captured here, which you've approved, well, actually, I don't agree with that at all, because we made quite a lot of contributions on behalf of next of kin that are not captured in here. Look, the dedicated service has spent £22 million, with another £10 million now on the meter, with another just 2 more years to go. The pace at which it makes adaptations and change is too slow, because the meter just keeps ticking, and this money just keeps getting wasted because it is not actually reaching the victims. So it's not Grenfell recovery money, you should call it council workers recovery money. 85% of the budget, and I'm now just talking about the dedicated service budget, of the first 2 years, which was supposed to be 6 million roughly per year, 85% of that actually went to pay for overheads. We've given you these breakdowns, and the officers just keep hoodwinking the councillors, and they're miscreant. It's deliberate. They can't account for what's happened to that £22 million. So now they're hiding behind bereaved and survivors and saying we have a steering group, or they approved this and they approved that. But the point is that they're not being honest. They don't put it on the table to the actual victims that this money is supposed to be supporting, and say, look, these are the options. What they give them is a very limited menu, and they don't tell them what that menu is costing them. So the fact that they say, well, everybody says it's absolutely marvellous and we're all very happy with this service and we're getting this wonderful service. Let me tell you exactly what the service consists of. People will call you up and say, hey, how are you? Are you okay? Is there anything I can do for you? And the person, just because they're there, will say, well, I've got a problem with my electricity bill. Can you call them and, do whatever it is? Stuff that people were doing before the fire that they're capable of doing after the fire. So it's all a lot of empty gestures and a lot of work that is really not meaningful and certainly shouldn't be costing that kind of money. The officers deny the true cost of things. For 2 years they denied the cost of the rental of that FFAC centre, and they kept denying and denying and denying, sending letters around to the BSRs and misinforming them about the things that we were saying which were factually correct. Finally, they were forced to admit it and send a letter around saying, let's do a survey and see whether you want a building that costs £500,000. So everything is being done against, with all these tremendous obstacles by the people who are supposed to be there serving the people. So if I were a councillor in RBKC, I would not trust any of these things that are being put out by the officers at all. You need independent information, not the official versions that they're giving you. And if I can say that one thing that you should have learned from the inquiry in this module that's currently running is that disconnect, whether it's deliberately looking the other way or not, between officers and the leadership team who have come to the inquiry and under oath said, well, I didn't know and I have to depend on the accuracy of what my officers tell me. And then the officers come and say, well, the culture of the thing is that we don't really whistleblow and we don't really say this and that. So they're all covering for themselves. Who's losing out? The taxpayer? The Royal Borough of Kensington and Chelsea taxpayers, the British taxpayers, and the victims, because they're not being served and they're frustrated. And as far as the steering group is concerned, there is no legitimacy in that, I'm afraid. And I tell you why. Because we've been in those meetings where the steering group members have said, I am here representing myself and my family, no one else. If you're a representative, you're supposed to have some outreach to, just like you do, councillors, you're supposed to represent your constituents. These steering group members are in a bubble also.
Kibia, could you bring your remarks to a conclusion?
Yeah, absolutely. So the next of kin, which is why there is all of this happening anyway. If no one had passed away, no one had been killed, none of this money and none of this stuff would be happening. The actual next of kin, the mothers, fathers, parents, grandparents, children, grandchildren, and siblings of those 72 people who died, do not believe in any of this that's happening, and I'm speaking on their behalf. It is not reaching them, it is no use to them, it has not worked for them. Having someone to call you up and say, how are you, is not recovery or support.
Thank you. I'm now going to ask Mr. David O'Connell to speak, and then I will get the officers and lead members to answer some of the questions that have been raised, and also then I will involve the committee who have been waiting patiently.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, David.
I will be quite brief because a lot of this meeting doesn't refer to Lancaster West, which is where I'm a resident and a member of the Residents' Association there. But I would like to say that as part of the recovery, the money we've received on Lancaster West for the refurbishment there has been in despite the council's best efforts, and I've never felt as an RA or as a group that we were being helped to achieve what we wanted, which was the 21st century model estate that was talked about by the leader many years ago. And I do feel that the fact that we have that money now is a great achievement, but also it's a great achievement, but it's been an achievement by working in partnership with the government and with the W11 team, which is probably the greatest thing the council has done in terms of recovery for the Lancaster West estate. And I would recommend that they use that model of our estate across the rest of the borough, because I think we're not the only estate that needs urgent repairs and urgent work, and it needs to have an improvement in the quality of life for all residents in Kensington and Chelsea to show that something good could come out of such a terrible disaster as the fire. And I'd also add that any improvements that do happen on our estate will just increase the value of the council's property portfolio and the assets they have. So I think the council should bear that in mind when they consider that's our compensation for what happened and what people are still going through on the estate. So.
Thank you very much. So I think I'm going to maybe start with officers. So Kimia raised quite a few questions. One was about costs, which we have heard before. Also, I would like to say it is difficult for us, you know, you're saying someone phones you up and that's not a good enough way of, you know, it is a difficult thing to do to quantify success, and I think that's something we're looking at now. We have to sort of, at some point, you kind of have to measure how much you've achieved, but that's no easy thing to do. The other thing about independent information, that is always difficult because it's always more expensive to get outside bodies to come in and look at us. And as far as the steering group is concerned, as far as I understand it, it is comprised of bereaved and survivors who choose to sit on it, and they are in control of what they are discussing. So I would also like to thank David for his comments about improvements in Lancaster West and how we could use that as a model really to spread across the rest of the borough. So Callum, I will start with you. Oh, sorry, Elizabeth.
Madam Chairman, can I just come in first?
Yeah, sure.
Just briefly, I'd just like to say, I thought the Audit and Transparency Committee had met for 2 hours this afternoon, in which case they would have examined, I assume, all the points that Camille was making. And I'd just like to remind the committee that what they're asked to look at tonight and comment on is a range of consultation engagement that has taken place since the publication of our resourcing framework in December. So we really want to talk about the future here. That's not brushing the past under the carpet. That's just saying that's for another committee. They have met. They've discussed it all. So I can't comment on what the Audit and Transparency Committee have said. All I would like to say is that we are absolutely sure that we want to get it right in the future, which is why we're engaging with everyone with a dedicated service to ensure that what we put in place, how it evolves, brings everyone with us, and that it is genuinely co-designed, because of course after 2 years things would have changed, people's priorities change, and we need to reflect that. Thank you. And I'd also like to say thank you to David for saying what he said about how, you know, Lancaster West is improving, and we always hoped that it would be the, you know, the model of a 21st century estate, and I'm really pleased that he's in great conversations with Kim, with, you know, a lot of investment going in, and that we are absolutely, I know the residents of Lancaster West have been fantastic in securing more funds from the department, you know, another £20 million the other day, and we're completely behind them in those requests.
Thank you. Callum, maybe you would like to comment on some of the points that Kimia made, or yeah, indeed on the paper in general.
Thank you, Chair. And just to follow on with Elizabeth's point, I just at this stage respond to one point that Kimia raised. It's one thing for an officer to be called and miscreant and other titles that were suggested, I think it's a whole other thing to question the legitimacy of the steering group. The steering group is formed of bereaved survivors, 8 of whom meet the rather exclusionary definition of next of kin that have been described. So 8 of whom meet the mother, sibling, child definition. And I think it's really important that we're mindful of the emotions. You know, I completely accept and respect that Kimia speaks on behalf of some of the next of kin, but not all, and indeed many of them, over half of the steering group, meet that definition. So I think it's incredibly important that we're respectful. They do. Well,
Kimia, please, it's disrespectful to interrupt Callum when he's speaking.
I would suggest that that Kimia asks one of the bereaved survivors to show her on the dedicated service website, which is only for bereaved survivors, to look at the names that are on the steering group, and it is not difficult to see that 8 of them meet that definition. So I think it's incredibly dangerous and incredibly difficult to deride other bereaved survivors in that way.
Joe.
Sorry, thank you, Councillor. I just wanted to add that I think it's really important to be clear that responsibility for decision-making about the service lies with the management of the service and indeed in some cases with the leadership team and other bodies that take formal decisions about it. So the steering group are a group of people who have put themselves forward willingly to contribute to the shaping of the service, but it's really important that we are clear, and one of the lessons of the public inquiry is that it's really important that we are clear where decision-making lies, and it's not with the steering group, it is with council officers and in some cases with members of the council.
Thank you. I'd like now to bring in some members of the committee. Councillor Pascal and then Councillor Hammond.
Thank you, Chairman. I have 3 questions. I don't know whether you want me to put them all at once or one at a time.
Put them at once, I think.
Put them at once, right. But 3 questions that I'd like to ask are that according to the resourcing framework, the Grenfell Projects Fund Round 2 should have been delivered by now. Please, could you explain the difficulties that have led to delay in this instance? The second question is, on page 5 of the report, it records that there are 300 sessions in schools and 100 in the community. All children will, of course, have had frequent contact with their teachers, even during lockdown. Please could one of the members confirm how contact will be maintained with those pupils during these summer holidays as we come out of the pandemic? And then on page 18, 5.9, please could you explain how lessons have been learnt in respect of the focus and means of commissioning services with the community?
Callum, are you going to answer those?
I'm happy to take the first question, if I may. Councillor Pascal is asking why the Grenfell Project Fund, the second stage of the programme was delayed. And it's true there has been a delay from what was already set out in the framework. And one of the reasons for the delay is COVID. Many of the programmes are not able to be delivered in the way that they were presented and approved. And then many had to be moved wholly or partially online, and that took some time. But I have to say now the programmes are being delivered, and many of them are really great, and they're programmes that residents have asked for and chosen themselves. So learning new skills, learning to swim, ride a bike. So finally we are seeing the results of that first programme. But we obviously also had lots of things to learn from that first programme, and we've been out and we have consulted, and there's been a multi-stage consultation with members of the community on what they'd like to see. So yes, we did commit to some timescales, but we've had lots of people coming back wanting more involvement, particularly in the decision-making about which programmes would be chosen. And there was some feedback, well, by the majority of those that we spoke to, that they wanted to take some time to set up a steering group of local people to help shape the programme and decide how it would be, particularly how the programmes would be chosen. And I think this is a great idea. I mean, it allows us to have a meaningful dialogue with local people to shape these conversations going forward. We didn't anticipate that would happen, but of course we wanted to act on what local people had to say, so we're in the process of setting this up. I mean, I think the main answer to it is that people wanted more time to give their opinion. And, you know, we've listened to that. And I think this is an important moment to hear from everyone, and not just actually on the community programme, but also from the bereaved and the survivors. And I think that gives us some really rich feedback to take these programmes on. So yeah, we completely recognise there is a delay, but actually I think it's as a response to what people have said to us.
With your leave, Chairman, should I
Yes,
answer that question
of
too?
course.
Thank you, Councillor Pascal. Really good question about maintaining activities for children over the summer. So as you know, last year it was more of a challenge with COVID, especially social distancing and everything. But I'm really pleased to say that the children who needed help and needed assistance, either through emotional well-being and support or other social service needs, were kept in contact with. Face-to-face meetings never stopped for those who actually needed it. But those who didn't, who preferred obviously to where they were shielding or something, we actually had a better engagement via online or via phone message and things. Although since that's somewhat obviously winding down now, and over the summer and whatnot, as you'll see in the report as well, if the decision is made on Thursday for the future of the emotional health and wellbeing support for children, we offer a lot of community-based settings that should be in place over the summer. So that's through organisations such as LCAT, Place to Be, the Catholic Children's Society, etc. Future Men is a good one as well, and they all offer community-based provisions in North Kensington as well. That's for children not just who are bereaved or survivors, but also all who may be suffering emotional effects of the tragedy. But you know, events are held in parks. They're held at particular different locations. For example, as we know, LCAT is based on Henry Dickens' estate, so they utilise part of the resident centre there in order to do that. And I've just seen a draft plan for what the future for the summer programme should be. But there are officers and there are community workers and those who we helped contract this support to really focus this over the summer, because of course as the summer progresses and people become a bit more confident in getting out in the community more, that need will still remain. So we're absolutely aware of that and doing our best with our providers in order to offer the best service possible.
Thank you.
Callum?
I'm happy to take the third point, Councillor, which is around the lessons learned from commissioning. And I think the main point there is about the approach. So I think what we have found is how we ensure that commissioners are building relationships with different providers, relationships with the community, and are more out and about and on the ground, so they can try and see what is working and what isn't working. I think commissioning probably for too long has been an exercise that is done from within inside the town hall, and I think what we've acknowledged and learnt through this process is that to commission well, you have to have relationships with the people you are commissioning.
Councillor Hammond.
Thank you, Chair, and may I say thanks very much to the officers for putting this package together and the leader for introducing it. My question's focused on the feedback that Councillor Siren referred to in paragraph 4.13, in which we're talking about the feedback for targeted support for children and young people. It seems the awareness has still got some way to go, in that we've got 66% aware, but still 44% unaware. And in paragraph 4.20, in the targeted support for adults in the community, we've got there reported 27% not aware of the support available. Now, obviously, it's early days, but Could the leadership please explain what you're doing to raise awareness so a larger proportion are able to benefit from these services, please?
Thank you, Councillor Hammond. I'll answer the question regarding to the children and young people on section 4.3 of the, 4.13 of the report. You're right. 44% is quite a significant number of people who hadn't heard of the either the school or the community and wellbeing support that was currently on offer. When I first saw that come through, I was surprised that it was quite a significant figure, and I'm not denying that that is an issue that needs to be challenged. And I did challenge that with officers. The good thing is now, since we've done that, we've looked at those figures, and indeed from a recommendation for the Family Services Select Committee as well, we're going to promote this as best we can. So we're going to promote it through via the schools directly, school circular. We're going to provide it directly through the council website, because at the moment there isn't a particularly section about children and young people and the services that can be provided, and that was a recommendation from the Select Committee, of which obviously our members attended, and of course guests as well raised that particular point too. So I agree with you, Councillor Hammond. It is a figure that is significant, but we're trying to address that the best way we can. But I think in a way, in part as well, this consultation also raised it as well, the services that the council do provide. But we're trying to work with our partners, again, through better communication and through our own communication channels as well, to really promote the service that is available, so people can utilise it to the best of their ability and what they need.
Councillor Lindsay. Kimmy, I'm asking, the committee members have not had a chance to speak yet, and I'm asking Dan.
Could I have an answer to my second question, please, Chair? Because I got a very comprehensive answer to the paragraph 4.13, but I also asked about 420, and I think Councillor Sara may have been about to answer that.
Apologies.
I don't know if she...
Thank you, Councillor Hammond. I guess what I was going to add is that I think we can build on some of the links that we already have with the community, so go through more through the existing trusted channels that we have. So I think housing associations, community organisations, I mean, of course we want to get those numbers up, but I think we can use some of the existing channels that we have and trusted channels that, we already engage with. So that's what I would comment across the board, really, but I think it applies to the consultation that was done on the, that's talked about in 4.2.
Councillor Lindsay, and then I'll go to you two.
2 points. First of all, I was at the the Audit Committee a couple of hours ago, and there was a request from several of the external co-optees that we have a joint meeting, which needn't necessarily be of everyone here, but of the OSC and the Audit Committee, to look at matters relating to Grenfell expenditure. So if I can just flag that up to you, realistically, September, October this year.
Yeah, no, I would be happy to do that. That would be fine.
Thank you. My question that I'd like to put for Councillor Rendell is, there is no direct reference to the Grenfell Education Fund. It may be that it is not part of the Grenfell Recovery Programme in its narrow definition, but actually it is a good news story. And can you please update the committee as to what is going on and how money is being spent well? And my question, I'd also be very interested to know, for Kimia and next of kin, how many people does she represent and how many out of how many? And if both she and Callum could answer, that would be very interesting. Thank you.
I'm not sure, David, that we can ask people who come here to, to make statements, that we can ask them who they represent. I'm happy to. Okay.
So, thank you so much, Councillor Lindsay, for allowing me to come back and answer your question. I'll be more than happy to. Grenfell Next of Kin is a group of people who are the immediate next of kin of those 72 deceased and are currently 29 of the 72 people who passed away. That is not wider bereaved. It's not distant cousins and what have you, which are obviously bereaved as well. But as any human being would recognize, as anyone in this room would recognize, if God forbid something happened to your immediate kin, you would want to be in the driving seat of speaking for that person and for your family, not other members of the family. And I think that's been one of the problems of what's caused a lot of friction and division. Now, to answer Callum, I don't like the way that every time Callum comes to these things, and he also sends letters around, is to target the next of kin group, which has created a lot of problems on the ground, also within and between families. It's very divisive. When we're making the comments about the steering group, I'm not saying that the steering group should be delegitimized. I'm simply saying that the people who are on the steering group who've put themselves forward have a right to put themselves forward. But even when we sat in those meetings, they have said, I'm here to represent myself and my family. And some of them don't even represent their whole family. There are divisions now between families. And the people who I'm representing are saying, we don't want people to be making decisions for us. We don't need steering group representation. That was all dreamt up by the council and by Callum Wilson. So that's that. In terms of Elizabeth Campbell saying, let's look forward, every meeting we come to, it's always about, let's not look backwards, let's look forwards. And meanwhile, every time we're looking forwards, it's still this repetition. It's like Groundhog's Day.
Kimmy,
and
I think
Anne Siren, and Anne Siren saying that you want to hear from everyone, but in your role, you have still not reached out to anyone who's in the next of kin group or to the group. So I'm really sorry. I don't want to be always here going on and on and on about what's going wrong. I'm just saying that words are cheap. These words and just words on paper, it's not actually executed on the ground. It's not being felt. Okay. And if you continue depending on these reports, you're going to have problems.
Kimia, thank you very much, but I think you've made your point, and I will now let the members of the committee speak.
Sorry, can I just bring back the report, Madam Chair? I'd just like to bring everyone's attention to paragraph 4.6, which is talking about the consultation that a proposal for a wide-ranging consultation which is going to be brought to leadership team on Thursday, which I'd be interested in the committee's views on. And it also addresses Kimia's point, because it says actually this consultation about the future of the dedicated service, about what is working and what should work in the future, is for all bereaved and survivors, not just the steering group, but everyone who has been bereaved or is a survivor. And we want to have them all have the equal opportunity to express their views, and we will be reaching out to all families, whether they're in next kin or in whatever. It matters to us to hear each and every one of their views. However, if you look in paragraph 4.7, although we recognise and respect very different views, there are some parameters which we need to put in. And one of the parameters is that, we're not going to change our fundamental commitment to support closely bereaved families, survivors, and residents of Grenfell Walk. We are not open to changing the basic criteria,
I'd ask you not to...
Madam Chair, for who is eligible for that support.
Kimia, we have allowed you to speak twice. Would you please sit down?
So I'd just like to reiterate that this consultation that we're proposing to bring to leadership team to agree is to reach out to all bereaved and survivors to hear all of their views so that we can shape the service for the next 2 years in the way that they wish it to be shaped.
Thank you, Elizabeth. And also to make the point that it is actually the leadership team that makes the decisions. the
leadership
steering
team will be
group
making
are
that decision. But
simply-
we're interested in your viewpoint,
Yeah.
which is, you know, why it's here.
but are widely consulting. Councillor Siren.
You know, I just wanted to add one more thing, which is that there are over 700 bereaved and survivors who are accessing the support system, and there are feedback loops in place. And I think if there was huge unhappiness with the support that we were giving them, honestly, I think we would see them here tonight. So yes, there is feedback, but there are many, many people who are being supported by this service, and the idea that it's being wasted and not reaching them, I'm sorry, I find that quite difficult to hear and quite disrespectful to the people who are being supported by this service.
Thank you, Anne. David, did you have a further question, or?
Education Fund, please.
Grenfell Education Fund.
Thank you, and thank you, Councillor Lindsay. I think that's a really good question. So for those who do not know, the Grenfell Education Fund was established, obviously, after the fire to help children that it was in special need of educational support. And of course, they don't necessarily need to live in RBKC. We've got children who live in Richmond and Kingston, etc., that are participants in the Education Fund. The Education Fund is distinct from this particular recovery program. You rightly say, Councillor Lindsay, that for the narrow parameters of this particular example is not included. The budget itself is distinct. So the budget for the Grenfell Educational Fund is about £500,000 for this financial year. About £230,000 of that comes from the DFE, and the rest of it comes from our RBKC funding. And how it works is that it's got a steering group made up of the 17 head teachers of North Kensington schools, and they put a bid into the GF and they discuss amongst themselves on how the money is spent. And we've committed at the last Family Services Select Committee to publish all the minutes from the Grenfell Educational Group, and they will be published shortly for anyone to access. It will be on the RBKC website. Again, was a recommendation from the committee that I have agreed to and do agree with. But yes, so in relation to your question, it is separate and distinct, but it is a part of the overall recovery framework, rather than this particular narrow, well not narrow, but part of, in terms of the children with emotional health and wellbeing support, that's separate and distinct, but the GEF does kind of work in conjunction with it.
Thank you. Councillor Evans and then Councillor Ali.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Loud and clear? Okay. What I'm hearing here, Kimmy has said we have two groups that are opposed to each other.
No, we're not opposed. Stop making problems.
Okay, sorry if I used the...
Sorry,
okay, sorry,
I
I've used the wrong word. Sorry about that.
Well, they cause divisions, and we have to live with these divisions.
Actually, I was going to say something positive, so why don't you listen? It would be really appreciated.
Choose your words carefully.
Okay, thank you very much. So what I feel is that we have a tale of three cities here, or three boroughs, all in our borough. We have a council, from what I've heard since I've joined the council in 2018, after the fire, I've seen a council that's officers and councillors who are really willing to help. They are constantly have Grenfell recovery on their minds. It is in every plan, in every policy. We have officers who are really dedicated to helping. We then have the residents' associations, and we have people such as David O'Connor who we can speak to. He may not like everything, or he may have suggestions, and we listen, and we try to work with him. This isn't a perfect council, it's a willing and helpful council. And then we have people who come to us, and I will get to the question. It is difficult to work with people who just are totally think nothing we do is good, because they can't, it's very hard to have communication with such people. And I would like to ask Callum and Joe or Jem, sorry. if you can perhaps suggest a better way of communicating for groups who just think everything is wrong, and maybe we can move forward from that. Because I get emails from a certain group, and they don't even sign it. So how can we be constructive? We need to have more openness. I think there has to be more give and take, as there is with David O'Connell's group. And I'd like to ask the officers what they think would help to make the communication better in that regard.
You can only talk to white people then.
Alan.
Thank you, Councillor, for the question. I think we in the Council are aware and indeed acknowledge that there are people within the community, bereavement survivors, and people from the local community for whom working with the Council will be difficult. And that's because of what happened with the fire, what's happened before, what happened since, and some of those dynamics are difficult. And I don't think that we can ignore that, or that it'd be right to ignore that. I think we must always try, as hard as we can, as difficult as some conversations can be, to listen and to acknowledge and to respect all the different views that we hear. So I don't think there's a magic solution to it. I think to some extent it's around how we keep engaging, we keep dialogue open, we try and share as much information as we can, we try and think collectively and creatively about how we can make improvements to the service. And I think, as the leader of the Council pointed to, our efforts, particularly on the bereavement survivors, that's one of the reasons why we're undertaking the whole-scale consultation. It's one of the reasons why within that consultation we're asking the question whether people want the Council to deliver the service. Now, if I'm honest, the feedback I get from the majority of people is that there's always things that we can do better, but that they are comfortable, that we're in the right direction. But there are people who don't feel like that. And I think having an open consultation where we put those questions out there, I think is intended to be, I don't know whether it's always received, but it's intended to be a mark of respect for the different views that exist.
Thank you. Councillor Ali.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. My question, if you may allow me, I have a few questions, and it's related to page 7, consultation, engagement, and across the program. So if you went down page 8, 4.7, and the report says that we recognize and respect different views, and the first bullet point, it's directly response to the question where we cannot simply end the service. I think the problem here is the expectation from the bereaved family and survivors and the services being offered. There is a misunderstanding. What do people expect? Do they want to get the cash and for them to do whatever they want with that symbol? Or is there a limitation to this? I think there needs to be clear distinction between the two on this one. Because this has been coming all the time. Some people want the support is this to make sure that this is not a compensation. So we have, I think that distinction has to be cleared. Whatever it is, the Council will continue to do what it does. That is, I think, what needs to be understood. However, we know, Madam Chairman, every program that has been made, or every, let's say, for example, the Scrutiny, we have Scrutiny system, new Scrutiny system, 18 months down the road has to be evaluated by external team and understood what it stands for and if we are hitting the right point. Grenfell now, the issue is about 4 years now, the 4th anniversary. I want to know if the leadership or any relevant lead members have been scrutinized or have been consulted with external team so that the services that they're providing for the bereaved and survivors are up to date and really providing the value for money. I want to know that for a fact. The second point that I would like to ask about the steering group. I understand some people want to come forward and support and offer their support and help other members and other bereaved and survivors, but is this steering group now open for everyone? This is what I would like to know. If not, has the responsibility of the steering group been advertised in advance so that anyone who would like to contribute have known in advance that this is what they're doing and what they're contributing, rather than just ask for a steering group and say, now this room is closed and we can no longer accept. If it's open, then perhaps members from Kemi's team or anyone else can join, and it will be an open system for everyone. And finally, my third point is, has the leadership or the relevant lead members have met, if not all, but most of the Grenfell survivors and bereaved families? Because what we want to know is to hear directly from them rather than from someone else representing them. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Ali. Callum.
Oh, I was just going to say one remark, response to Councillor Ali. When he's talking about scrutiny of the executive, I would say, well, that's your job. I mean, that's what you're doing now. You're meant to be looking at the service we provide and scrutinising it. On the whole point of the scrutiny system, I understand that Madam Chair's got the Centre for Public Scrutiny in to look at our scrutiny system to see how well it's doing, and that there will be some sort of impact statement, and there will be a thing looking at all our governance, which will come to the full council meeting in July. As the question is whether we've met all 700 bereaved and survivors, no, I don't think we've met them all, but I think several of us on the leadership team, of course, have met people over the years. Of course we have. Thank you.
So thank you.
I just
reply first, and then yes, it is our job to hold the leadership to account. That's right. But I think what I understood from Councillor Ali was he was suggesting that perhaps we would get some independent people to come in and scrutinise us. But as I said earlier, yes.
We have independent people coming in to scrutinise you. That's why we've got the Centre for Public Scrutiny to come in.
Yes, in a way we do.
So hopefully
yes.
they'll find that you're doing an excellent job scrutinising the executive.
Can I come in, Madam Chair?
Yeah,
Thank you. This is going back to, and I'm sure the leader, if I make it clear, when I mentioned about the scrutiny, I've used it as an example that we, as a team of the scrutinizing, the council or relevant teams, we have 18 months now. After 18 months, it will be to look into whether the scrutiny system is working for us. That was an example that I've used. But what I'm now saying is, it's relevant to what Councillor Judith Blakeman was giving the evidence, and we're all about the inquiry, to have an external report to compare with what the officers are telling us. That is what I'm heading to. It's not about the scrutiny, it's the report of Grenfell funding, how it has been supported the bereaved families and the survivors. That is what I'm after. The scrutiny that I have mentioned is just an example. So I'm suggesting here an external report. Grenfell is the biggest disaster any council would have at this moment, I would say. So that's a report, not the scrutiny. Thank you, Madam Chair.
I think that goes beyond the centre, what Councillor Ali is asking for. I mean, we have had a stock take, which will be shared with you shortly, the Centre for Public Scrutiny or Governance and Scrutiny, because they've changed their name, can't remember. But they have been looking at us and how the scrutiny side of things is performing. But I think Councillor Ali is more asking an external, not an auditor, but a person to come in and look at the leadership team. Is that what you're saying?
Just the reports the officers have been providing, and the money has been, is how the money has been spent on Grenfell, so that we can have another independent report, not from our officers, whether it is the scrutiny or any other team, an independent report that is out external from the council, so even can help us to scrutinize properly. Because sometimes you need an independent report for us to look into more.
I've got what you're asking for. I mean, things like that are expensive, is all I'll say. But I'll let Elizabeth answer.
I thought that this whole papers had come to the audit committee before this meeting. They'd spent 2 hours looking at it, and they have independent people co-opted on the audit committee. So that's what I'd say to that. And otherwise, of course, we've got the public inquiry looking at.
Yeah, I think I'm.
And we've had the Kroll report.
what I'm understanding is Councillor Ali watching the public inquiry and looking at the quality of reports that we, the scrutineers, get to look at. That's what he's talking about.
I'd just like to put on record, I have absolute faith and in the officers who are writing these reports. I believe in their integrity, I believe in their honesty, and frankly, you can cross-check the figures because, you know, tonight we're actually talking about a consultation. You've got the figures in front of you. Nobody's faking all the reports. They're there in writing. We have an audit trail of what people have said. So when we go out to people and we say, what do you think of this? And they reply, there's an audit reply thing of their replies. So to a certain extent, we are double checking. And of course, Anne knows people and talks to people. But I really would resist this tendency to think that our officers aren't doing their job properly, because I would put my absolute life on the line to say that they are.
Madam Chair, can I just correct one thing, please? One final thing. Sorry, Camille.
I'm sorry.
Camille, please.
I'm sorry, Kim. We asked you to come and speak to the meeting. You're not a part of the committee to be in a debate, I'm afraid.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, thank you. If I may just agree with the leader of the council that I have 100% and absolute trust of our officers, and I don't remember how many times, maybe hundreds if not thousands, that I've thanked them for their work, for their continuous work, and I will always do that. It's on the record. I kept saying that, and I have full support. They have our full support, not just me, but I'm sure our full support. However, there's no problem in today's democracy asking for someone else to look into the figures, to look into the details, and give us an independent report. That is what democracy is all about. But please, I would say once again, I will never doubt our officers, and I thank them day and night for what they do.
Thank you.
It's exactly the same as the inquiry. You mark your own homework, you write out what you want to do, and you jog on. This is wrong.
Kimia, will you please stop shouting at us? Kimia, I'm going to ask you to leave if you don't.
I will leave.
Okay, good.
And then we will demand a debate, and we will push this up further and further and further. So it's in your interest to give us a full, transparent debate.
Marwan.
You'd be hearing from someone senior.
Thank you. I wish...
Sorry, Callum, did you want to say something?
I just wanted to answer Councillor Ali's residual questions, if that's okay. So there were, I guess, three quick points. One was about the steering group you asked, and just to confirm, we have, there's been 2 open processes where we've written and contacted proactively bereaved survivors to be able to join. So on an annual basis that we undertake that exercise. The second exercise we saw a lot more people join, which was fantastic, and new voices with older residents and younger residents. So we have, I feel we have a better selection and a better range of people in terms of their spread of expertise and experiences. So, and we'll be doing that again as we come forwards. It's worth pointing that although it's an important part of our programme, we have, since the course of setting out the dedicated service, we've undertaken 2 open surveys and feedbacks. We undertake, we have a quality assurance week every month, whereby managers proactively call residents, bereaved survivors, to get their experience on other cases. So the steering group play a pivotal role, of course they do, but they are not the singular voice and the singular mechanism through which we secure bereaved survivor feedback. I think the second point is around, you identified in the first bullet point in 4.7. We include that in this paper because there have been, it's less of a point that gets raised now, I would acknowledge that, but in previous calls and demands there have been requests for what seems to be a dissolution of the service and an idea that we could transfer the residual 50 million directly to families. And when that was getting shared with people, it caused people quite a lot of confusion. So we're always really clear about that now. And I think one of the reasons why it does cause confusion is it's important to note that at the same time that we, the council, are delivering the recovery programme, we, in another part of the council, are agreeing insurance payouts and other forms of compensation. So it's entirely understandable why the people at the end of that support may sometimes get confused about the parameters and the red lines of the different funds. So we include it in everything now, just to make sure that we're really clear. And the third point was around building on what the leader of the council was saying about the assessment of the work that we're doing, and on Councillor Lindsay's point. I think there is I think in the Audit and Transparency meeting earlier, there was an agreement that there would be a joint meeting, and at that joint meeting of the OSC and Audit and Transparency Committee, we would suggest bringing our first impact report, which I think would also be an opportunity for both committees to be able to see and dig into some of the figures that we present. And we're also agreeing a whole suite of internal audit assessments of the dedicated services work, which I pointed out at the previous meeting. But for those who weren't present, we've got an existing audit into how individual services work, which is one part of the programme. We've got another audit scheduled about to begin about support planning, so the quality of support plans and where people are saying they're making progress or not, which is where we get quite a lot of our statistics from around satisfaction. So that's an important point to audit, to make sure people have confidence in that. And really importantly, we've agreed that there'll be an audit of the consultation exercise, because when we first set out the service, we did work very, very closely through a two-stage process with bereavement survivors to hear the range of different views when we set out the service. But I think it'd be fair to say some people, some who have been present tonight, lack confidence in that approach. And this second big major review of the service is incredibly important to us, because it's an important opportunity for us to hear, and we want to have confidence, and we want you all to have confidence and the community to have confidence that what we say came out of that consultation is correct. So that's why the audit committee will be reviewing that consultation exercise as well.
If I can just take the time to thank you as well. I think no one will doubt your ability and your talent, so thank you for the report. And I do welcome the joint meeting, hopefully, when the time comes. Thank you.
Thank you. Marwan, Councillor Nali.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you. I actually, the point I was going to ask, Callum just mentioned it regarding the impact and the analysis. And before I just elaborate on this, I really thank Kimi and the Lancaster West Resident Association coming here to tell us their view as well, because for me, with due respect to everyone regarding majority and minority, to me, those who've been affected by Grenfell tragedy, one is too many, not to be able to reach out to them. So, and I'm sure Colin and his team recognizing that. I can see it from the tone, from the report, from what you are doing. And I share Councillor Ali, we have every faith in new officers operating in such a very difficult situation. We have the pandemic. That needs to be acknowledged. Reaching out to bereaved survivors is not as business as before the pandemic. So, and what I've seen here in your report on 5.3 and 5.4 is a new approach, which I really acknowledge, and I hope you can put more, as you highlighted, the impact, the various aspects of it. And what's giving me comfort is you are recognizing that there are the need for a new approach. And this is where I really feel that the impact and the various aspects you are going to present to us, I only need is more data, quality data, and I appreciate how sensitive this might be, and that's why I was so hesitant, with due respect to my fellow councillor Lindsay. I think putting, give me, who do you present? To me, even she represents one person, from bereaved survivors is too many if we are not able to reach that family. And I'm really grateful to our leader of the council that she recognized the complexity and the issue we have at hand here now. So basically, what we come, only things I request is really more data, so hopefully in the next phase of the analysis, this will be presented to us in that approach. And thank you. Really, that's all what I have to say. And just to conclude, in the context of the public inquiry now, the feeling and the mental health issue is very high. So please, in light of correspondence, communication with families, try to be looking very carefully at the phrasing, at the wording, in term, even saying it in a good intention, it could be interpreted in a very bad way, and this will undermine your good work, which I believe and I have every confidence that you are going to help our community to go through this phase of uncertainty. So mental health, please put it as a framework on addressing this communication. And thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Mason, and then Max, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I hope and believe that the Leader of Council does understand some of the emotional pain that happened, because I remember you have walked through those 3 or 4 years at some of those events amongst people who were emotionally upset as well as angry. And if I remember rightly, you probably had a tear in your eye at some point, as we all had. You can't help getting the feeling if you're with those people. And I think it's sort of a tale of two realities. I've always believed that I listen to what the bereaved and survivors say and the wider community. And as Councillor Alge said, even the people that sound like oppositionists, and we heard of them on the Grenfell inquiry, they can teach us something. They are the people who are often shoved away, but they have the answer to the question, as happened in Grenfell. And the people out there on the ground, that I spend a lot of time working with those groups and walking with them, because I really, really believe, and I believed in my ward for over 30 years, that you only know your residents if you live with them, walk with them, and I've done that with Grenfell. And they see this council through the eyes, at the moment, of the inquiry. They've heard that horror evidence coming out, and they're not sitting here listening to you. They're listening, they're at the inquiry, and they'll be protesting outside the inquiry tomorrow morning. And they still see this council as the old council, the council as was. We are the Grenfell Council. We are the council, as far as they're concerned, that killed 72 of their people, or the decisions that we, or the council, the previous leadership team made. That's what they did, as far as they're concerned. And you'll hear it again and again and again and again. I remember, in terms of scrutiny and consultation, I remember when I sat on the Grenfell Recovery Scrutiny Committee, which Councillor Nalgi chaired, and this strategy, the Grenfell Recovery Strategy, was going to the leadership team the next week. And then it went to the leadership team. In that committee, those room was full of bereaved and survivors, as well as other people from the community, and they told us, who had told them that we were going to listen to them again and again and again, and I mean the leadership as well as us. They told us that they wanted to keep the Grenfell Recovery Scrutiny Committee, and I won't rehearse the reasons why they said that, but they did say that. And the council abolished it. And then when we went to the committee, to the leadership team, and the room was full of people, effectively the same group of people, and they said, you are going to approve a strategy that we do not believe in, that you didn't consult us with. Whether it's true or not, that's what they said, and that's what they believe, and you shouldn't do that. So there's been a mistrust of this strategy all the way down the line. And you can't construct a strategy that everybody's going to agree with. Of course, it's not possible. So they saw that as a failure of scrutiny. If you couldn't, as one of them said to me, if you couldn't allow us to continue with the Grenfell scrutiny, if you couldn't get the Grenfell Recovery Scrutiny Committee to do what you wanted it to do, you just abolished it, just got rid of it. So I thought that was a failure of scrutiny and a failure of trust in many ways. And Councillor Evans quite rightly asked the question, how do you deal with people who think everything we do is wrong? Because from 2018, her perception, of course, and I understand why it is that the Council has been bending over backwards on Grenfell. And it's not your fault or anybody else's fault on this Council who wasn't there back then, but it's just such a different emotional trauma reality out there. They don't... people who have had their families killed, as far as they're concerned, and I know the leader of the council's met them the same as I do, they've lost 3, 4, 5 members of their family, and you know they'll never be the same again, and they're not going to be thinking about any of this the way you do. They simply will never, ever forget, from their point of view, that this council didn't listen, and they don't have any family members anymore, and they don't have any housing, and they don't have their community, because they love their community. Never mind that we may have looked at Grenfell Tower and thought, you know, that it was something undesirable. They love their community. They love their community of people. And from their point of view, that's raw. And it takes years for that to go. And their children will remember that their mothers and fathers and uncles died. And what I remember that morning, and not only me, was going down there, and I had to listen. I had to listen, as Councillor Nagy did, and Councillor Dempcourt did, and others, Councillor Blakeman did, who was in the inquiry today, the people screaming at us to do something, to listen, and the council wasn't there. That's what I cannot forget, that they were screaming for help, and I couldn't help them because we were not there. And even though we were the minority party, I still felt an enormous guilt that we were not there to help those people. Never mind that this disaster happened. So it's such a different reality that you can never go back. And that's why you hear what you hear. Why are they not listening? Why are they not being logical? Why don't they understand? I know Callum understands. I think he understands. Why are they not being logical? This is not a logical situation. This is a disaster that they drink that never leaves them day or night. And 4 years later, it's worse than it was then. They are exhausted. 4 years of exhaustion, mental, physical. They're not sleeping at night. They're seeing the faces of the people that died. They're going through all of that. And why are they not being logical about this? It's not your fault and it's not their fault. It's just how it is. Life will never be the same for them again. Their life is gone, destroyed. The whole community is destroyed. That's the problem we have here. That's the problem we have here. 56 years after the Aberfan disaster in Wales, the 90-year-old mothers that are still alive cry for their children that died in 1966. I understand because I've been with them and I was there, and I can never forget it. That's the problem. That's the problem with all this. You know, I know you understand some of this. It's terrifying. I mean, in the inquiry, the stuff in the inquiry, the horror in the inquiry of the contractors that we hired and that our TMO hired, the criminality of these people, that's almost minor compared to the emotional destruction that's been done to a whole community. And I know you understand this. And I know Councillor Nalga can't even say it because he's more upset than I am about this. But that's the problem here. So when these people come here, I know that's where they are. They may sound angry. Some of them sound, I'm angry. Some of them sound angry and others cry. You know, at least the angry ones are able to survive a bit longer. The ones that, like Amanda Beckles, who committed suicide in 2018, you know, she wasn't angry enough, so she couldn't handle it. And there's more people out there who are on the edge, basically. So I think that's the problem. I mean, when I look at all of this logically, it sounds logical to me. They're against them and all the rest of it. But actually, it's a much deeper problem than that. And especially because the council is a new council, all of these new members that you've got, they have no idea emotionally. How could they have? They have no idea emotionally, which is why I often say in the council, and I'm saying this because my last meeting here, that you need to listen to what the evidence at the Grenfell inquiry is. The greatest lesson you will ever learn about how not to do in any area of local government what has happened at Grenfell and what keeps happening. And I'll coin a phrase, the only thing that we ever learn is that we never learn. But we have to learn, because these are 72 real people with families that were obliterated and died. And we walk amongst them, and I walk amongst them, because I can't walk away from them. There are people, you know, and they cry and we cry, and you know, they are in the most incredible pain, you know, that nobody who's not been through it would be unable to understand. I understand that it's not possible to understand unless it happens to you, and God forbid that it ever happens to you, because if it does, it's a pain that almost nobody can bear. So I just ask for I know they're annoying, I know they are, there's lots of different groups like that out there, but they're all in pain, you know, they're all suffering, and we, in the end, I don't know what will happen in the end, but it'll not happen for those people, you know. We need to,
thanks, Pat.
I hope we need to remember to overlay that on this. There's a horror out there that they live every day that doesn't equal, it's not logical, it's in the heart, it's emotional. You know.
Thank you, Pat.
Madam Chairman, can I just come in? Thank you, Pat. I think you've actually brought us back to reality, because as you say, the paper is dry as bone, but it masks a lot of what's going on underneath, and as you said, the absolute rawness that people are feeling at the moment. And I think what I'd like to say is that's why Callum has been trying so hard that when we look to shape any service, that we do reach out and really talk to everyone who's involved, because as you say, every voice is important. One person who's bereaved is not more important than the next or a survivor. It's everyone, isn't it?
But I'm not making a different point here, Madam.
No, exactly, and that's why we're really trying to work as well as we possibly can with people, recognizing exactly what you say, that some people are very fragile at the moment and will continue to be so. So thank you very much for that. On another point, just to come back to what Councillor Ali was saying about data and how do we know things and what's the impact, and the Grenfell Scrutiny Committee, I think that's one of the reasons why we want to bring an impact report annually to you.
Yeah.
So you really have got something that you can interrogate.
Yeah.
And hopefully then, you know, whereas the last 2 years, there hasn't been enough almost to hold on to.
Yeah.
And so hopefully in the autumn, when the first impact report comes to you, you'll see a big improvement. And again, if you look in paragraph 5.3, they talk about a draft impact evaluation framework with 4 key outcome areas. So participation and inclusion, well-being and recovery, community leadership and capacity building, and finally, almost back to what Pat was saying, voice, feeling heard and involved. And, you know, central to the whole new approach is being able to have that whole amount of initiatives, and for us to be able to come back to you in the autumn with some of the dryness, but not just the quantitative stuff, some of the qualitative data as well. I think it's very important that you see both, because as you say, Councillor Ali, you're absolutely right. you do need to interrogate it, and it can't be everyone marking their own homework.
Josh, did you want to say something quickly?
Thank you. Yes, just a really a personal comment from me. Councillor Mason, I think what you said was one of your best speeches you've ever given. You brought it home in a way that I've not heard summarised before by a member of this council. I think you could hear the emotion in your voice. You could hear the burden you're carrying. I guess we're all carrying, but perhaps more you and Councillor Nalgi more acutely so. And I just want to say, you know, I just wish more people could be around to hear it, because that was absolutely fantastic. And I think it brought home to me especially, in my role, what I can do to help and what I can do to more, and, you know, understand some of the suffering the community is under, more so, obviously, the past fortnight at the inquiry, and that has really brought home a lot of emotion, a lot of relived experiences from that night, and a lot of distrust in the people who make decisions on the behalf of the residents. So, Pat, I just want to say thank you. That was absolutely brilliant, and you know, best of luck, and thank you for serving on this committee. I didn't realise it was your last one, but thank you.
Max, did you want to? No, it's all right.
Chair, Madam Chair.
Pat, did you want to say anything, or shall I sum up?
I wasn't intending to make a speech.
Okay.
I wasn't trying to make a speech.
All right. I'll sum up then.
I wasn't. I just think that's the reality I live with most days out there, and we're quite often talking about reports and whatever. I mean, I'm not on this committee because I'm no longer the leader of the Labour group, so I always believe the leader should be sitting at the top table, and so I'm coming off. But I'll still be coming to these committees, you know.
So,
you know, as the leader said, I think that we're quite often we're immersed in figures and all that sort of thing. But out there, it's particularly with Grenfell. I mean, if you study disasters, they all run this. You've got people that you call oppositionists there all the time. They wouldn't be coming here if they weren't interested in what was happening. You know, they're coming here because they are interested in what's happening. They just might not be giving you the answers that you want. But in every disaster, they're there. They're interested, but, you know, as I'm not going to repeat what I said earlier, but they're in that soup. They are in that soup, you know. And they may well cry themselves to sleep at night, some of those people. The toughest people will cry themselves to sleep at night, but you don't know it because they're very tough and they'll come here, you know.
Councillor Ali?
So it's, that's
And then I'm going to
I think
wrap up.
we need to remember.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If you allow me, I'd like to thank the Leader of the Council for coming back and answering the questions the way we think it was right. So I appreciate for coming back, and thank you for answering.
Okay, so I would like to thank everyone now, especially Pat for your moving speech, and for everyone who's made a contribution here tonight. I mean, I think what's come out is that delivering services to the traumatised and people who are suffering from grief is a very difficult thing to do. I mean, I also have confidence in our staff that are trying to do that, and but the few things where I would say we could improve would be in getting out the awareness of services to everyone, and the consultation. I think that will be very important, and that will help. And then also something that the leader said, I think that measuring success is difficult, quantifying success is difficult, and that's right, we haven't really been doing it because we've just been trying to get things going. But I think as time goes on, so I guess this is my recommendation, that as time goes on, that we do get more, you know, data and information, and we have impact, so we can begin to quantify, you know, have we actually, what have we achieved, kind of thing. And I think that would help. And I also think the point that Marwan made about more data is always helpful if you can get it. So I think my recommendations are, I think there's been a lot of improvement actually in Grenfell recovery strategy, and I think tonight has ended up as a good discussion, even though it didn't start out that way really. And so yes, I would like to thank everyone and move on to the next item on the agenda. Thank you. Which is the council plan. Was that you, Elizabeth? Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, in 2019, this council had its largest ever conversation with residents and businesses right across Kensington and Chelsea. And it resulted in our first ever council plan, a blueprint that reflected what our communities valued most, what we wanted to achieve together, and what everyone could expect from the council. However, in 2020, the whole world changed. Nobody could have foreseen the way the COVID-19 pandemic swept through the nation, nor what was left in its wake. You know, here in Kensington, Chelsea, as in London, as in the rest of the country, we endured isolation, lockdown, job losses, and we all lost loved ones. So our entire way of life can change almost overnight, and the impact will be felt for many years to come. And this revised plan is a reflection of what has happened and how we want to support communities to recover from it. And it's a draft plan, Madam Chairman, which is why we're bringing it here, because we want to hear comments from the Overview and Scrutiny Committee before we take any decision or becomes the council plan. First, we bring it to leadership team on the 9th of June, and then it will come to full council on the 23rd of June. So over the last 6 months, we've taken the opportunity to assess and to chart the progress that we've made on the promises given in 2019 and adjusting the second half of our plan to reflect the new world we face. We took time to check in with communities to see if their priorities for our borough have changed. And we haven't torn everything up to start again because many of our priorities remain the same. Our green ambitions and credentials, safer and cleaner streets, building new housing, and continuing to fund a community-led recovery from the Grenfell tragedy in 2017, which we've just been talking about. So in this draft that we have before you, we've refreshed our ambitions and laid out what the community has told us is now most important to them. Some themes have remained, but other priorities have emerged, particularly in relation to our local economy, employment opportunities, and in physical and in mental health. So in addition to the personal grants, business support, and additional service support, the Council has now earmarked £8 million in recovery fund to meet the COVID-19 challenge. You know, we want communities to bounce back from the pandemic, and we're determined to build back better in our borough. And we're determined to put in place strong foundations over the coming months, build on the amazing community work that's already underway, and enable the people who live and work in this borough to have the very best opportunities in life. And Madam Chairman, I really do believe that together we can build a greener, safer, and more equal borough, and this is the plan of how we're going to get there.
Thank you. Could I start with a question, which is, well, two questions, and they're both about money actually, but the first is investing in our high streets. How are we going to get our high streets to live again? I mean, it's going to be very hard, isn't it?
I think it depends on the area. I think if we look at Kensington High Street, I know that Catherine's been working very hard with the business community to set up a bid here, a business improvement district, to see whether we can bring all the businesses together and, you know, and see what they can do. I mean, we can do small things, like you've seen the little parklets that we've put in, you'll see the banners we've put in. We're having the Kensington and Chelsea Arts Week, which we're supporting. We're going to have a Summer of Love, because the most important thing is, in the absence of foreign tourists, to bring everyone to London. We need the footfall for our shops. So part of the money that we've got in the Recovery Fund will be funding things like the Kensington and Chelsea Arts Week and indeed our own Summer of Love, so that we can tell everybody how wonderful Kensington and Chelsea is and encourage them to come here. In the King's Road as well, again, we ought to have a bid up and running in September. And then, of course, all the retailers pay into this money so we can afford other things. If you've been down to Sloane Square recently, we've already got the square is occupied with a tank field, with pizzas and margaritas, and we're really trying to bring everything to life, again, to attract people in so they can come here to Kensington and Chelsea and spend their money here.
Thank you. Max, do you have any questions? I'll start with you this time. Will.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I've got 4 questions I'd like to ask. Do you want me to ask them all in one go, or?
I think all in one go.
I can group them into two sections. The first thing is, I'm not quite sure about the whether this progress since 2019 page will stay, because if it does, I think it's a very useful summary of some items, but there are 1 or 2 things that I'd like to comment on and ask about that are maybe not there or need a bit more explanation. The first point is that it talks about 0.75 billion spent on housing. Now, it's not entirely clear as to whether that's money that's been spent within the 2 years or whether it's money that's been committed for forward work and planned for a longer program. So I just think that needs a clarification. The second point is under healthy, clean and safe. In page 26 in the report, the updated plan, refers to the Council 2030 C0 commitment. But as such, I think that is a completely unique commitment for this Council to make, because usually the Council has policies, ambitions, etc. But in this case, the full Council, all parties, NEMCON, committed the Council to achieving C0 in its own operations by 2030. And there has already been amazing progress. It's a big mountain to climb, but there's been amazing progress. So bringing that 2030, it's not an ambition, it's a statement that the Council will do it. And it's well received from my soundings from our Select Committee in the community as well. It's seen as a very positive. I've just come to this meeting from a meeting in the Kensington Society, a virtual meeting, and Octavia Housing were talking about passive housing, and they quoted the 2030 as an exemplar of what council commitment from their context and their view, which, it just shows how leadership by the council and a very strong statement about what will happen. So I just asking the question as to whether that needs to be mentioned on the first page. Similarly, page 34 in the updated plan refers to a vision improving council service and access to into particular councillor services directly by residents, and being able to interact with the council services in a much more interactive and self-serving way. And that progress has been made on that. There are difficulties. Those who are involved will know that there are difficulties in that. But it's not, again, it's not in the summary. I think it's a major achievement and a major mountain to climb. The final thing I wanted to say was that on pages 22 to 25, it's very good to see the mention of transitions. And it would be good to have an explanation. And it's sad that maybe that Josh Rendell has gone, but maybe the leader or one of the officers could explain a bit more detail of how the transition from children's to adult services, especially for those with mental health and SEND, will be ensured, because it's still a very tricky area. I mean, other councillors may and officers may not know, but if you're on an SEND plan, you don't transition until you're 25, depending on your circumstances. And how those two services interact, and with public health as well, is a complex issue, but one which is a very good ambition. It is in there in the report, but it's, again, not mentioned in the front.
Can I come back on that?
Yes, of course.
You're quite right, Will. That 0.75 billion, I think it's very confusing too. And it is what we spent in the past and what we've committed to. So I do think we need to look at that. The healthy, clean and safe stuff, the 2030 carbon zero commitment. Yes, you're right. We should really be singing to the rooftops about that, especially as we are the council in London who've cut emissions more than any other council in London over the past 5 years. And of course, we've got our £10 million green fund that we're now committing. I didn't get your, forgive me, I didn't pick up what you said about the page 34 about 1 billion or something. So maybe come back on that. And you're absolutely right about the transitions. It's such a major piece of work, and it's a really, really important one, as you say. And we've already started work on that, but I might ask Erica to come in to see whether this is quite high level, and then underneath this, there'll be a sort of plan, which is quite granular, to make sure that everything that we say, we have a delivery plan for, and indicators, etc., that we'll come back to. Isn't that right, Erica? This is just the sort of top level thing. So I'm glad you agree on our top level items. I think maybe you need to turn your mic on, or maybe it's my ears.
No, that's my apologies. I didn't do that. Page 34. My point was simply that on page 34 there is quite a strong statement about the need to bring together the services of the council, which are often very good, into more of a service for residents rather than a series of producer services with an S, to a council that is providing a service for its residents, and also to make it more self-serving. As you know, even if you go to the post office, they're not perfect in everything they do, but you can actually track and trace the service that you've access for yourself. I know we have big problems for legacy computer systems that don't work, etc. But there's a real need to bring together, as we're already doing. I mean, things like Crest and so on has brought together some of the services, but there is still no connection between some service areas and customer services, for instance. And there's a confusion in the community who often have to go through through councillors to actually unravel some of the complexities of how you access services in the council. There's good work going on, and there's a commitment to do it in the report. It's just not in the summary at the front.
Councillor Hammond.
Thank you, Chair. Underpinning this report and the delivery of the plan is the culture of the council, which I'm going to talk about this as sort of overall point. And a lot's been written and said about changing the culture of the council since 2017. And probably even the existence of this report is symbolic of the change of the culture of the council. But I'd be very interested in the perspective of both the leader and the chief executive of how it's going at your levels, but also at the coalface, because this is a real work in progress. And how's it going from your point of view, please?
If you look at the work we've done on equality, diversity and inclusion and that strategy, if you look at, I suppose, one of the biggest cultural shifts is the way we engage with people. Just the conversation we've had over the last 2 hours about how we are absolutely clear that we are equal partners with our residents or our businesses about how we need to shape services for the future, and that we really are servants of the people, whether they be businessmen or cleaners or residents, and that we need to reflect in everything that we do, which runs through this report, what we hear from them, what our strategy is. And one thing actually I ought to add, the one thing that isn't in this report, which will be when it comes to leadership, I believe by Thursday, is we have a new citizens panel. So to be interested to see what their reflections are on this report. Barry, I don't know if there's something you want to add.
Yes, in relation to the issue of organisational culture, something that's often discussed and asserted, but very difficult to try to capture. Really, it's about how we do things around here. You know, that's the sort of, there's a feel about how things are done when you go to an organisation. And I do think that the emphasis that we had following Grenfell about empathy being outward-facing, being other-regarding rather than self-regarding, that's been given, and there was another issue about that as well, which was silo-based. The point has been made by Councillor Pascal. I would say that the COVID pandemic has transformed. Yeah. So we were doing theory about creative collaboration, really. We've been doing it in practice in the last year, and I do think the imaginative approach to how you collaborate to do something new you've never done before, and we're doing it new all the time, and doing it across silos such that it breaks silos down and more people are working corporately. I think that the pandemic has helped the organisation in its cultural journey.
Yeah. Can I just add to that? If you think about it, about how we've worked with the voluntary sector, with with food banks, how we've worked with the faith sector, how we've worked with the NHS, actually, our other partners. So take something like pop-up vaccination clinics in the mosque. That's a really good example of the local authority, their trusted partner, the mosque and the NHS all coming together. And I think Barry's absolutely right. Before COVID, we talked the talk, but COVID gave us the challenge of, put into practice what we said we believed.
Pat? I'll go to Pat first. Yeah?
Residence section, of course, people are supported with their mental health needs from the earliest opportunity, with continuing focus on their well-being. And of course, with COVID, after Grenfell, we know what the mental health trend is. I can't see in the what we will do, although maybe in a lower level section, what we will do, what our strategy is. I assume it's to try and deal with it, but I don't see anything specific under the what we will do. And of course, we know that the mental health problems will have rocketed, rocketed in the borough. All the different agencies dealing with that will tell you. And most councillors' casework, I can only talk for North Kensington, quite a lot of the element of our casework involves some kind of mental health reaction from people. All these people jammed together, cheek to jowl for a year under virtual house arrest, with all the different issues and problems. I mean, you can, probably about 50-60% of my casework has got some kind of element of that. So we're going to have to deal with it, either in partnership with the NHS or somebody else. We're going to have to deal with an increased trend. And of course, if people have got mental health problems, they're not going to be fit for employment or all sorts of other activities in life. It goes into the way the family works, domestic violence. You know all the figures yourselves. You don't need me to tell you. So the strategy presumably needs to take account of that. In health, clean and safe, sustainable, were of course starting on page 26, I think it is. Reduction in health inequality that has widened during the pandemic. Well, it's all part of the same thing, really, I suppose. I suppose because strategies are words on paper, how does that translate in terms of mental health and health inequality? How is the strategy meant to translate into dealing or beginning to deal with the issues after COVID of mental health and dislocation and isolation and loneliness, all those things? And there's a lot of young people with the same problems, and they're the ones who want to get back into work, etc., etc. And if they're taking drugs or into antidepressants, there's a lot of them taking all sorts of antidepressants, or they're just not fit. They're doing counselling. I can't tell you how many people I know who I don't think are fit. Young people who are fit for employment in any way because of the state they're in, And they've no money, they're stressed. How does the strategy kind of answer that, look at that, plan for that, think about that, provide what for that, to go with the high street, the building new high streets and all the rest of it?
I was taking mask off. Thank you, Pat. I think you're right, actually. I think we've mentioned it, it's so difficult to know which bits to mention more. So if you see on page 24, it says, people are supported with their mental health needs from the earliest opportunity with a continuing focus. So what we'll see, but I agree, what we will do, I suppose, part of it in this, what we will want to do, refresh our commitment to encourage community networks, online shop, personalised access, refine hospital pathways. But I think you're right. I think there's maybe there's something else we can add. Yeah. No, I think you're absolutely right. So thank you. I think we need to, you're quite right. We probably have it in our recovery strategy, but not in here. And I think you're absolutely right. We need to. So thank you.
I'm going to go to Councillor Ali, and then I'll come to you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think what we were looking forward here, and I share the view with the leader of the council, that we want to make our borough the best place to live and the best place to visit. And I think we can use this opportunity, despite what has happened and the lockdown and everything, to attract the best of the world to come to our local authority and local borough, our residents, and to see the difference and the good stuff we offer at this borough. And I think we can also use a very good opportunity for us now to give opportunities the good employment. As I've seen the report, 5.4 of our residents are unemployed. 11,400 of them are universal credit claimant, and almost 8,900 of them are furloughed because of the lockdown as a result. I would say this is a time that, regardless of the political colours, we work together and make sure that we give our residents the best opportunities out of this pandemic, and hopefully set the standard for the next generation. And I think if we get all councillors working together, regardless of the political colours, it is the way forward for us. And yes, we may have disagreement in how the way to do it, but when the council, passes the plan, I think it's for every council to approach the leadership or relevant officers to work with, and to make sure that we give an opportunity, especially the youngsters, those who graduated 2020 and those who are graduating 2021. They didn't have an opportunity to do work placement. They didn't have an opportunity to start employment. And imagine for them, the world, collapses at their face. And I think I have been approached by residents who are asking, my daughter, my son's graduated, they haven't done anything. What can you do as a local councillor? And I had to think about it overnight. And then I said, okay, this is what we can do. And when I was looking at the report, that actually put to a real situation into what I've been asked. And I think it will be a strategy for all of us to work together, and not only to attract the best of the world to come to our borough, but also to offer good employment, for the environment. Because if they don't have to go travel 30 minutes or 40 minutes out of borough, where we have the best jobs here, I think that's something that I personally am willing to work with the leadership, and anyone else who can get this done for our youngsters and our newly graduates. Thank you, Madam Chair.
I think you're absolutely right, and it's the age, isn't it? 16 to 24, they're the ones who've been hit hardest. And I know Catherine's doing quite a lot with businesses to look at the Kickstart programme to see whether we can get people in. And certainly as a council, we're looking at, again, apprenticeship programmes, because you're right, it's really hard at the moment because so many jobs have dried up, and we're hoping that, as we said, by attracting people back and getting businesses going and back on their feet, that creates the jobs for the young to fill, really. So I'm 100% behind what you said, Councillor Ali.
Thank you.
Councillor Lindsay.
Elizabeth, one of the outcomes of the lockdown COVID is that a number of shops in particular, but also offices in high streets, have gone out of business. It's exacerbated a problem that has been, we're all aware of, with people buying on Amazon rather than in physical shops. That's going to mean that a large number of premises in the high street are going to be vacant permanently. What sort of things are we going to be doing to encourage what, and should that feature in this council plan?
Well, I'm not sure everything is going to go bust, actually. I was talking to a big landowner today, and they feel quite confident that footfall will be back, and, London's going to have a good economic bounce. Of course, that won't be spread equally, and it won't be spread evenly. I think that's the issue for us. It's how we help shops that, for example, I know Kim has been doing, if over the last year, if we're the landlord, going through on a case-by-case basis to see whether they can be, because, of course, some shops are doing really well, and as I said, King's Road's doing, quite a lot of it's doing really well. And I think the other thing is, so if we're the landowner, of course we can help, and otherwise we have to use our sort of convening power to bring people together to get things off the ground, because we don't have any direct powers. So it's kind of a question to go back to what I was saying, of seeing what we can do to sing about what this borough has to offer. Our amazing museums, our fabulous parks, our beautiful street, our al fresco dining. Don't go to Paris because we have continental cafe culture here. You can come to Chelsea. You don't have to go to the 7th arrondissement. We have the 21st. It's all that kind of stuff that we're doing. We're helping the museums in, they're going to rewild some of Exhibition Road. It's that kind of thing. How can we be part of it? We can't solve it on our own, but how can we be part of the visitor economy, of drawing visitors back in so our shops flourish and they can offer jobs to the young that Councillor Ali was saying are finding it really tough at the moment.
No one. Marwan and then Janet.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just quickly, I'm just interested of when you mentioned at the end of your introducing the plan, making our borough more equal. Then you keep mentioning a lot in the south as an examples. King's Road, Chelsea. I love it. This one, I moved to this borough in 1991. I love that part. But Kensington, if we reverse it, like taking the socks and pull it in reverse, the north of the borough, maybe to your knowledge as well, for example, in Kensal Green Cemetery, we have a famous engineer. He's buried there with his son. And this is where the university named after him, which I am an alumni of. Do you know who that famous engineer is? Brunel, Eisenberg Brunel. Yep. Yeah. And actually that's gave me the more strength in establishing that link again with the Brunel University for North Kensington. And I am really grateful to what you are, our lead member for skills here doing in the business forum in North Kensington. But if you look in the north, regarding facilities now in Portobello Market, in the facilities there's a lot of visitors coming. And I'm looking at it from a health perspective. You don't see really a good amenity place to wash and for our families to visit, for families and children, for changes, facilities. There is no such facility. For example, if you go around the Portobello Market near the Ackland Village and the Portobello Green area, there's a lot of people visiting there. But believe me, and there is a lot of stalls for food, international food, beautiful, I've seen it. People are complying with health safety, that's my main concern. But the facility is not there so how are we going to address this inequality? I think it's there, isn't it? This is why we have the equality inclusion strategy, because we recognize there is an inequality, isn't it, in our borough, and there is a drive to make that equal in that sense. So what provision you put in the medium term to address that issue?
First of all, I have talked about Chelsea, but I guess because I'm a Chelsea councillor, but I'd also like to point out that the borough with quite a lot of, I think almost like the third amount of social housing in it, is in Chelsea. In fact, two of them. One is across the road from me in Standing Ward, and the other one is at Wells End State. So just because we say Chelsea, you can't all glaze over and say they're all privileged down there, because that doesn't run true. Secondly, I suppose I was mentioning Chelsea because we talk about Kensington an awful lot, and I was just thought I'd take the opportunity to use examples from other parts of the borough as well. But you're quite right. Portobello Road is you know, such a magnet, such an exciting part of the borough. And again, to come back to Councillor Ali's point, a great employer of people and a great attraction. But I'm not sure whether the facilities itself is just too, you know, this is quite a high-level plan, so I'm not sure whether it would be something which would be appropriate to put in here, but it is something that I need to take away and ask. It was Jem who was talking about it last year, wasn't it? It's probably Johnny, actually. Can I get them to come back to you after this meeting? Because I know we were looking at all the sort of public facilities around there, and I think there are in Westbourne Grove, but I'm afraid I don't know the detail, Councillor Al-Naghi, so I'll need to come back to you. But it's a good point.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Janet.
Chairman, could I just, I've been here long enough to know the answer. I thought Councillor Nalgi was talking about the toilet facilities, which, well, back in 1995, this council was an A1 authority for toilets, and I think it was Councillor Moylan when he was deputy leader of the council. I'm not blaming him specifically, but the council went through a programme of decommissioning what we called public toilets, and there were public toilets at Acklam, where Acklam Village is now, although it wasn't called Acklam Village, and there were also outside in an area outside the Lambert Grove tube station. And further down the market as well, and they had amazingly, some of them had baby changing facilities in a little room. But the council went through a process of decommissioning them because they at that time said that they were not, you didn't have to have them, they were not mandatory. So you started cutting them, and what happened was that in the Environment Committee, the argument was, well, if you're going to get rid of those, you need to put commensurate number of auto-loos in, and we didn't like the auto-loos, and nobody in the market liked them. There was a huge campaign by the traders to keep them, thousands of petitions, whatever. And but of course, the council committed to putting in auto-loos, commensurate number, but then once the toilets were knocked down, they didn't. So we had that one auto-loo in Tavistock Square, which breaks down every so often. So this council, like Westminster Council has now, we had the same sort range of toilet facilities. They've got actually quite a good range of toilet facilities because they kept theirs and we didn't. So we had that, and that is a real problem in an area like the Portobello Market because there's old people, there's people eating food, and the businesses used to put up notices because the council said something like, you can use the local businesses, and they all put notices up saying, not unless you're a customer, you know, because of course they didn't want people using their toilets. And there was a story in the newspaper how we, the council, had nationalised all the private businesses' toilets. So the point I'm making is that Councillor Nalgi is right. People liked being able to go to a toilet within walking distance, not having to walk to Westbourne Grove for a toilet when you're on the market, if you're not just happening to go to a cafe and you want to have a drink or whatever. But the policy of this council back then was to get rid of them, basically, right? The only reason the one is still there in Bevington Road was because they couldn't get anyone in that area, any business. There was no place to put an auto-loo. You couldn't put it there beside the school, beside the businesses, whatever. So we had the A1, but we got rid of it, and I thought it was a wrong decision then, you know.
I don't want to go down the rabbit hole of loos now, but I remember one of my lead members telling me that the ones we've got as well are very, very old, and you know it costs like £3 a pee now, and so there's something in that. But it's certainly that's something we should come back to you on. I'll find out from you.
Can I come on? Can I?
Yeah. But anyway, it's good to have it. It's good to have the potted history here, Pat.
Can I, Chair? Can I one?
Janet.
Well, now that we've become lavatorial, I would like to ask Barry Quirk, what is the policy because of COVID-19? I see that some of the public loos have been closed, and quite rightly, so we will have to take that into account.
Well, I think I'll get the public health people to...
Sorry, I can't hear you with the mask.
My apologies. I think the only sensible answer I can give to that is that I'll get our public health department within adult social care to actually advise on this issue now and in the future, because I can see the difficulties. So they're obvious, as you say.
New homes, what form did they take? Flats, houses?
That's the 0.75 billion question in the
Mainly flats, but
first.
they're mixed tenure. They're not on the whole houses. They're new homes, so it's mixed tenure, and there are 4 lots of schemes. And we started building already on, I think it's on, I was going to say Kensington Road, but I might get the wrong road. But we have started going, and I can't give you any more sort of granular detail than that, but I can get it for you because I do know the schemes are going ahead.
Point that I thought was very good. In your report, you talked about cross-cutting, and I think a lot of the problems that have come as a result of COVID have also addressed mental health issues, and there are people have had personal loss, death in the family, etc., trauma, and we can cross-cut between Grenfell recovery and I know we are doing that between adult social services and family services and family and children services. So I think your idea of cross-cutting is really important because it does raise issues that are for many different groups and not they don't have to be compartmentalized. So thank you for that.
Now to Ali. Nope. Okay.
No further question, thank you.
Well.
Could I ask a question perhaps of either Leader or Barry? Are you getting any sense, maybe it's too early, but there's been lots of talk amongst different media about the effect that the COVID pandemic will have in maybe fast-tracking some change that was happening anyway. The thing I'm referring to particularly, say, in relation to council, is when I started as a councillor, we probably had very few people working from home. There were a few exceptions, and there were a few job shares. Before COVID, we probably, I don't know what the average was, but it was going around about half a day a week or something of that, maybe, that sort of order. And some pundits have now talked about things moving to maybe a couple of days a week. There have been announcements from Google and other organisations that we might move to an economy where we work in the office for 3 days a week, or at the council 3 days a week. If that shift happened, when would we start to notice it, and what effect would it have on the economy? Because it may not change the visitor strategy, but it might have a big effect on the amount of office space that's required, the number of people that actually work in the borough. And this is a borough where most of the people who live in the borough work outside, and most of the people who work in the borough live outside. So there is that travel change that might happen as well. And I'm just wondering whether there's any evidence that's beginning to come up.
I don't think there's necessarily evidence yet, but there's certainly been a lot of reports, certainly for London councils. We've had one by Metro Dynamics, another one by Arup on the Central Activity Zone, saying that even under the best scenarios that one can think of, you're likely to have footfall decreasing by a fifth, because people might come in 4 days a week, but they won't come in 5. And that's sort of accelerating a trend. Whether it's happening here, most of our staff at the moment are still working from home, but of course there's always going to be a core who have to be here 5 days. You can't tell your rubbish men that they can work from home 1 day a week. or your street sweepers, or your wardens, or your children's social workers. We have quite a lot of people who, by the service that they give, they need to be here. But for the others, for some of the back office staff, if you're an accountant or someone like that, lawyer, you might not need to be here 5 days a week. But I think I'm right in saying, Barry, that you've got a call to arms to return tomorrow with the staffing, but it will depend on different service groups.
Yeah. I think there's a big issue about London as a whole and the way in which people flow through it, both to work but for other reasons, travel and gather for work and social reasons, cultural reasons and so on. But then there's also about the strategy of businesses. And the strategy of businesses is there was a report in the FT about a month ago about the City of London, and within 2 days there was a further report that contradicted that report. There's some chief executives of large office organisations that are saying to people, you've all got to go, and the others saying, no, please don't come. We want to be able to sell this prime asset and benefit from that. But I think what you have to start from is, what is the benefit of working with other people, literally with them? Yep. And I think there is the workplace as a place for collaboration. It is possible to collaborate vicariously through the internet, the wonders of the internet, particularly with people who you know. But for people you don't know, it's very difficult. And we've probably had 200 hires, I guess, in the last few months. And so there's always a flow of people. And what is it like for new entrants to the organisation that really have only met people through teams? So I do think there's workplace as collaboration space, which enables sort of chance encounters, problem solving. I think that benefits team productivity, bluntly, as well, thing which is difficult to measure. I think there's also workplace as a sort of social space. That it's an anchor. I mean, people spend, an inordinate amount of their time at work or doing work, and doing it at home all the time means that you are losing out on that social connection that anchors you to other people, which isn't necessarily a work-related thing, it's a personal thing. It enables you to have sort of emotional connections, workplace connections, and so on. But I think also offices and workplaces are places where people learn. They learn and they develop, and they grow through that learning. It's not just about chance encounters and creative collaboration, it's about learning. In-depth learning, immersive learning, and I think it's very difficult to see how this can be done other than in workplaces. I mean, workplaces, the sort of management gurus would say it amplifies the productivity so that the organisation achieves more than the sum of its parts. And at the moment, we are just the sum of our parts, really. I think that the other issue, of course, is about health and well-being, and we're having a long discussion with staff tomorrow about the whole issue of sustaining people's well-being at a time when, seeing the four corners of one room for quite a long time. I felt like a submarine commander for the past year without a periscope. But I think that the key thing for us in local government, over and above those things, which apply to all organisations, and it's the hints in the title, local government. We are here to serve local residents and communities. That's the purpose of being here. I don't think you can have 85% of your staff providing services to the public when they're not there. And we are already in a situation where, as an authority, we really only have 50 councillors and probably 200 to 300 staff who are here all the weekend as well. Most authorities probably have thousands of people who have got personal connections locally because they live there as well. So I think there's a special requirement on us here and in central London, in Westminster and Camden as well, and also in places like the city. It's very important in this central activity zone that actually we are present. Because I think, with the visibility comes accountability and it comes ownership as well. So I think there's lots of reasons, and I think some of the trends in the private sector won't apply to local government. But it does mean that we'll be able to use digital much better. And also, I think it's leading us to more varied solutions. So we're not just dreaming up things locally, we're studying what's going on around the whole of London. Because the degree of collaboration across London now is, it's very, very strong. I've never seen it in, I daren't say the number of years, but I've certainly never seen this in many years. The level of collaboration there is at the moment, for example, on the variant of concern in northwest London. Something that's, obviously in Hounslow at the moment, but actually it's well known about across the whole of our public health community and across our readiness and in management. So I think things have changed dramatically. Sorry about that long-winded response.
Okay, if I have no more questions, I'd like to thank Elizabeth and Barry for coming here tonight. I always like the council plan because it's so aspirational. And I like the picture. But I was going to say one serious thing that thinking about change, I think somewhere down the line, this next scrutiny year, I think we'd like to have a paper on the change process. So what we were saying earlier, we haven't been measuring it because we've been doing it, but it's almost 4 years now, and I think maybe now is the time to start to look and see how much we've done, yeah? So I've given you warning.
I'm afraid I'm going to have to say something I said in the earlier meeting, the audit meeting, and that is that if you think about what Pat was talking about earlier in relation to the way in which the inquiry, the realities of the inquiry bear on the council, the public's experience of things and their reflection about things. We as an organisation have never done in the last 3 years a management review or an organisational review of what went wrong. And that's because it would have compromised the inquiry.
Yes, I know, I do understand that.
And so we've always had this issue about how do we learn while doing without intensively going through what actually is being intensively gone through in the inquiry at the moment. So, for example, I've never heard some of the people speak who've spoken about what they've done. I haven't personally heard them before. So I've learned from looking at the inquiry. We need, I think, to be really careful about how we don't compromise the position of the inquiry while achieving what it is you want to achieve.
Okay. Maybe we should think about it. Think about it. Okay. All right. Thank you very much. So moving on, I believe we are going to the work programme now. So, okay. So, folks, Jackie has produced a table of all of the things that all of the committees have done. So I hope you've looked at them all and to make sure that we have not left anything out.
Madam Chairman, before Barry and Elizabeth leave, could I suggest that we say a thank you via them to all the staff of the council for what they've done during the COVID period in particular?
Oh yes. Thank the staff.
Good.
Sorry to interrupt.
Okay, so I think I'll start by just saying everyone knows that we've had this stock take done by Ed Hammond, and I was asked not to sort of disseminate it because of all the sensitivities at the moment. I think what we're doing, Jackie, we're having a meeting with the chairman. That's how we're doing it first, isn't it?
Yeah, when the new chair's confirmed at the AGM tomorrow night, you asked me if I'd organise a meeting with the chairs and Ed Hammond to come in
discuss
and discuss it.
And then after that, will we be able to release it to all of them?
Release it whenever you want, yeah.
Yeah, because I think, I mean, I don't 100% agree with all of it, but I actually think it's got some quite useful things in it and suggestions for us to take forward. And then, yeah, I had it. So, I have some question for you, Jackie. On 4.1, and this goes to some of the reports that we've had recently, it says we carry out qualitative and quantitative research. Do we really have the capacity to carry out quantitative research? Because, you know, a lot of the reports are coming through, the numbers are low. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, it doesn't count as quantitative research because the numbers are too low. And then the one we had yesterday, was it your housing paper yesterday? Yes. About the voids, the empty homes?
That's correct, yes.
Those tables in it didn't make any sense, did they?
It did. I understand where you're coming from. However, I think what we have asked was to aim for more easily understandable. And you remember we've had, we have this we've this talk before that we want to make it compact, but also understandable and readable, easily readable, so that we can digest the information and the data you're giving us. And I think what they have said yesterday was they will work on it, and especially when they want to show what they have done and what the target is. And we've talked about figures like 28 days or 49.
Yeah, because well, they didn't make much sense at all. But what I was really asking, Jackie, do we have the capacity to do quantitative research, or when we're using other people like the GLAs or somebody else's stats for when we do that? Because we really haven't got we can't really do it, can we?
Yeah, we can do some. We wouldn't do anything, I think, on the scale of the council plan, what's just been described, because I don't think we'd do a scrutiny project of that magnitude. But we've done some in the working group. So we had the Healthy Homes working group, and there was some research in that from the call for evidence. So I think we can do some. It mainly happens through the working groups. So I think we have got the capacity, we can do it, but I think we just be realistic. But sometimes scrutiny is looking at more neighbourhood issues, so we're not always looking at things across the whole of the borough.
I think quantitative would have to have an N of more, about, I don't know, 1,500, 2,000, and we can't do that. We can't, I mean, even if we did like big surveys and things, we wouldn't get that much of a response, would we?
No, but as I said, some of the working groups are looking at a particular topic, and so we're not looking to get that amount of people to...
Madam Chairman, it depends, I think, a bit how you define quantitative research. Certainly in the Environment Select Committee, we've been doing quite a lot of quantitative work when you consider that the push that we gave for the Council to brief and present the figures through the Ether report. We went for about 10 years of my experience of being a councillor where buildings were not even part of the air quality and climate change consideration at all. And this year we've now got the figures that say that of the carbon zero 2030 commitment, that 90% of the job is through the buildings, a large part of which is the council's housing stock. And then further on from that, if one looks at the council housing stock, which is nigh on 10,000, it's not 10,000, it's nigh on that number, It's a 10-year commitment from when the 2030 motion was passed in Council. We're already 2 years through that, and one of the issues we've been talking with people like Doug Goldring and others is about the cadence and pace that they've got to achieve that quantum. They can't start in 3 years' time and then do it all within a 5-year period. So it depends on what you mean by quantitative. I think in that sense, the numbers and even the acceleration and such, analyses as that were absolutely fundamental to the gearing up of those issues. And then there's the financial side, the numbers on that. We recently identified a very large hole in the finances that are going to have to achieve that target, and have talked with finance officers and procurement officers as to how that hole might be filled. At the moment, it's in the shape of the way these things happen, but the numbers are going to have to be achieved to achieve the programme, which is a commitment. So I think that the quantitative nature, we won't do a lot of detailed data gathering, but we can certainly look at the quantitative shape of the problems being faced.
Okay.
Madam Chair, can I contribute? I think we also need to remember from last year we had a backlog of, for example, the housing and communities backlog of agendas and information to go through. And I think this year, the difference will be that we're starting fresh another year. For those who will be confirmed tomorrow, we'll start fresh, and it will be able to actually dig deep for the information that we want to, whether it's how data will be presented, qualitative, quantitative, and then we'll be in a position to work with directly with the relevant officers, and if not, the information that we want, how they present it to us. For example, we've talked about, you remember one of our meetings, no more than 4 pages, and that was a suggestion we had discussion as the chairs. No more than 4 pages, but also the data that we want cannot be lost or cannot be buried in a larger document where we have to take a long time to read. I think what we can do for the next year's scrutiny system is to limit the number of pages, as well as specifically give them a guideline of how we want data to be presented to us. And I think that could only happen when we have a meeting on June onwards, or when the new scrutiny team have a meeting June onwards. Remember again, last year we had almost 9 months of scrutiny, not 12 months. We started late in September, but this is an opportunity to set the standard in advance and to learn the lessons that we've did it from this year and then move forward. And I think there's a good chance that we can get the data presented to us the way we want as a scrutiny chairs, and of course as a committee.
And the other thing is that if we get the papers enough in advance, we can send them back for corrections, can't we?
Not only that, yes, you're absolutely right. Not only that, we also have received some of the minutes late, and we have to understand the officers have been a lot of under pressure, and so many things that have been happening, people working from home. So we have to allow, or we allowed more time for officers to do other commitments, but at the same time to give. I think this will be maybe timetable to say we will require the reports in advance, let's say 2 weeks, 2.5 weeks, whatever we decide, and then we know exactly. If we're happy with the data, we can send them back. But as we were operating, just the year just finishing, we were operating almost the nick of time, and I think that will change this year onwards.
Okay. So the only other observation, we've got the workshop on the 7th of June, which is virtual, thank goodness. And then just looking through all of them, we have done quite a lot of Grenfell items, whatever anyone says, really. We've done, I think we've done about 5. So, is Kazim leaving now? Oh, yes, Kazim. Okay, the other thing I was going to say, which I think is a very good idea, is bringing reports to full council. So if you've produced a report, working group, I think it's a good opportunity to stand up in. If it's an important issue that maybe other people would like to discuss, then that's, and I think it's good because it brings what we're doing into full council. So I think that's really helpful as well.
Sorry, can I just add, we've asked for 2 reports to go to full council in June, so the Healthy Homes Working Group and also the report on the education support provided by the council to students affected by the Grenfell tragedy. I've
So,
asked...
are people going to speak to them, yeah?
Yeah, I've asked if the Mayor can, I think that's the agenda, if they could find some space for those 2 reports on the June agenda.
Greg, are you going to speak?
I was just going to say I'd be very happy to see, and would be very happy to do it, and I'd quite like to see an email on the subject to warn me, but yes, please.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because I don't think I've been copied in on anything. I do know from Cassie...
It's not tomorrow, it's due.
No, because tomorrow's the appointments one.
Yes, June.
So I asked for June.
No, I know it's not
But I'm
June
waiting
tomorrow.
for confirmation that there's space on the agenda, and
I see.
otherwise we will ask for July.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, Janet, when you add, I was just saying we have done quite a lot of Grenfell issues, and especially in your committee, you've done Grenfell quite a few times, which is quite good. And does anyone have anything else to say about...
Well, we have a commitment in our committee to always address Grenfell at every meeting.
I think all of the committees
Yes.
have.
Yeah.
But it lends to some topics more than others, doesn't it, really?
Yes.
So it's more important, and schools is very important.
I think, Madam Chairman, also that one of the things, certainly in our committee, that we're going to, I mean, subject to agreement by the committee and by the workshop and so on, is that we're going to move from a more inward-looking, because this year with COVID and everything, 2030 council target was a natural target to look at. I think the next year, the next commitment of 2040, which includes the whole of the borough, and involves obviously the partners, NHS and individual householders and all the other people who operate in the community in relation to the 2040 target, is a natural way to go, because it also means we follow the recommendation that Ed and his team have given us of going out more into the community, and we now can hopefully from June onwards go out and have meetings in the community and meet more with and gather evidence from groups outside. So there'll be a natural progression, I think, to do that, and I think it'll help us do what we've been urged to do by the Centre for Scrutiny.
So, Jackie, have you got anything to say about, anything more about the work programme?
No, thank you.
Okay, so then move on to the key decisions.
Madam Chair, just one clarification.
Yeah.
Just on page 3, Jackie, for on the support for because maybe I missed it when I was just out. Support for scrutiny activity and methodologies. Can you clarify, for example, on the to carry out commission qualitative and then source external experts? What the mechanism for that? What the process?
The process?
Yeah.
Well, you could either speak to me or speak to Paula, who's been supporting your committee, and we'd do that. So I know that you arranged someone to come to speak to the very first meeting of your committee. We've used the LGA to provide support for the safeguarding item. So if you talk to me or Paula, we'll talk to you about who you might want, how we would get them involved.
I see, all right. So this is the same things what we've been doing before then?
Yeah.
No changes?
And if you want to do more of that, we can do more of it, because
All right.
it's important that scrutiny does hear, obviously from the lead members and the officers as we have tonight, but also from residents, and we've had residents, I think, speak at all of our scrutiny meetings, but also to get external experts, so you're hearing a different voice, and they're bringing that. So hopefully that's what happened with the safeguarding as an example, when we had the LGA advisor. Yeah.
Okay, so moving on to the KDs, with Tom's lovely new tracker. I just picked out a few, just going from the first page. The North Kent Community-Based Recovery Service for Adults, and then consultation with Grenfell bereaved and survivors. We haven't got any scrutiny on that, and I think we should have on both, shouldn't we? I think they're the second two. I certainly think we should look at the one bereaved and survivors in view of what was said tonight, really. Does Does anyone have any other ones they want to? The financial ones, sorry?
Chair, I just wanted to confirm that the consultation with the bereaved and survivors, I think that links to the paper
Sorry,
that you
Jackie,
had.
can you speak to the microphone, please? We can hear
Sorry,
you.
I'm not used to it. Sorry, I apologise. The consultation with Grenfell bereaved and survivors, I think that links to the paper that you had at the last meeting.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so you've seen that, and it has taken into account. My understanding is that it's taken
Okay,
into
we've
account
done it.
the
Okay.
comments of the committee.
That's
So I'm
fine.
sorry, that's just an error in
Okay.
how it's been displayed.
Okay. Oh yeah, 05. That's really clear. Okay. Finance ones can all go to the budget working group. What about commissioning of the Health Child Programme? One for you, Janet, at the top of the page, and it's for adult social health care and what's it as well, so agree procurement strategy for the commissioning work stream of healthy child programmes, work stream as part of the over fives, transformation, blah, blah, blah. Okay.
I have a question. Maybe Will or Kasim would know the answer. On repairs and improvements, Ashburnham Primary School, it says to release $140,000 for the extensions of classrooms with voids. What does that mean, with voids? What?
Which page are you on?
Kasim said it means empty spaces.
A void
It
is
is
an
number 05491-19/SA.
A void is an empty property, council property.
That we were discussing yesterday.
Oh, I see. I wasn't at that meeting. Okay, thank you very much for that. And Marie-Therese, what about this one here? Number 20/SAB, appointment of contractor for All Saints Catholic College. And it says that it's going to appoint a contractor for the second phase of works, the value of $2.5 million. Would it be worthwhile to have a look what that $2.5 million is going towards?
If you want. Empty home strategy.
Janet, from memory, it's expanding the school somewhat, and we are contributing to it.
Right, but shouldn't we see something a little more specific? Sorry?
It's not a number picked out of the air. There will be justification for the whole amount of it. If you want to call, but you can certainly do
Well,
that.
we'd just like to know what it is.
Ask Josh then.
Yeah.
I think one of the questions you might ask, Janet, is in the context of the reducing roll amongst pupils across the borough, as to what expansions are being, if there are expansions, they may be refurbishments rather than expansions, but if they are expansions of capacity in school numbers, that might be a valid question to ask.
Yeah, well, especially All Saints Catholic College, their numbers have dropped significantly. So that is a relevant question.
Well, I think the school rolls are dropping.
Yeah.
But can I, having had that portfolio, they were an all-girls school. They've now become mixed, I think. And they've got a new headmaster who is much improved.
Okay.
Yes, but the overall cohort of children across central London is going down. And therefore, certainly it's a question worth asking, because for the Family and Children's Service, the schools support group, I mean, Ian Heggs and all that directorate, have done some work with some outside advice on the capacity numbers in
So
schools.
why do we keep on building schools? That's what I don't understand. Or
But where it's replacing out-of-date facilities with new facilities, then that is that's a different question. Well, that's to do with value for money and how it enhances the educational background and all that sort of stuff to achieve outstanding results. But the question about capacity now, unlike a few years ago, is definitely a valid point, except in the area of SEND, severely SEND people. So Barby Special School, for instance, is a new school, but that is picking up on an increasing demand within the borough. So there's a differentiation between general and specialist.
Okay, I've got one more, which is mental.
I think, sorry, Madam Chair, I think this could well be an item agenda for, I think, Janet's team scrutiny to look at it specifically rather than us.
As far as I've known, the roles have been falling for a good 2 or 3 years.
Right.
And we keep on spending money on schools. So I would query that. But there we go, that's for the budget working group, not me.
But what I'm trying to say here, that could be a role, this could well be her scrutiny committees rather than the overview and the scrutiny committee. They can look into more details and get in touch with Josh, definitely, for that. Because they haven't got date, so it says in due course. So probably when they said, the leadership sets a date, then you can inquire about it.
So what would you suggest, Jackie, in which format shall that, I think Will formulated it in a very productive way, in which format, in which committee, how would we address that?
Make a suggestion, because this is something I've been involved in as a chair of governors on a working group with Ian Heggs, is the first port of call. I would suggest that you, as Family and Children's Services, ask the question about the generality of falling roles of pupils across the borough, combined with the works that are being done on existing schools. And if you get an answer to that, then if it's a question to do with the money and the value for money and that sort of thing, that would perhaps be more to do with the finance group rather than that yourself. But in terms of provision for children, it would seem to fit within your area. I wouldn't commission a working group until you've actually just got a straight answer to the question from Ian Heggs and his team, because he and Josh will be able to provide you with a good brief on this, because they've already done the work.
That's exactly it. I think we'll get
just get updated on the work they're doing at the moment. It's been discussed in schools forum, and it's been discussed in chairmen of governors meetings and heads of schools meetings, etc. So it's well circulated. There are good papers and good officers behind that. Get that information to you and then make your own mind up as to whether you want to pursue it further. And any financial things, you may need to work with Adrian Barrow-Cox's group with the chair and OSC on the finance side. But Chairman, that's my suggestion. I mean, it's subject to your decision.
It's up to Janet.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea not to have a working group, but to get the information.
I think we haven't got to the stage of getting all the suggestions together, prioritising them, shortlisting them, and then deciding how to cope with them. So I think that's a bit premature. We do it start on the 7th, I think. See how we go. Does anyone else have any other ones they want to look at? No. Okay. I think I will declare them.
I'd say that I think it would be nice of us to thank Tom and others who worked on this, because this KD tracker, whilst maybe it's not perfect, and I think maybe having some sort of way of pointing to things on the... Jackie, I don't know whether it's possible to have some sort of numbering from 1 to 10 or something, or page numbers or something of that sort, because when Janet was pointing out a report that she wanted us to consider, she could give us the number, but I couldn't find it. I mean, it's no disrespect to Janet. It was just that there was no way of finding it.
Okay, so I would like to thank Jackie and all the scrutiny team and all the chairmen and all the other members of the committee.
Can I take this opportunity to thank you, Chair, of course, for whatever you have done. Really, really appreciate it.